Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Cox from Delta PD. He has 30 years total in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Cox. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we were laughing offline because you mentioned to me, you're like, I might be the newest chief you've ever interviewed. And you said you just got sworn into this chief position on Friday.
That's right. Yeah, Friday. I was the interim chief for about 3.5 to 4 months, but yeah, I've only been the chief of police for 4 days, if you count today.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I was laughing because I knew that you were entering into this new role. I don't know if I put two and two together that it was that quick. And I was like, man, I don't know how he found time. I don't know how you found time to come on here. I'm sure that you're drinking from a water hose. So I appreciate you coming on here and talking with me about wellness and leadership. I'm looking forward to it. But you've been in this profession for 30 years. That's a long time. Give us maybe a little bit of background into what those 30 years have looked like so far.
Honestly, it hasn't felt like 30 years. It's been a profession that I've had a tremendous amount of fun in. It's been tremendously rewarding. Of course, you can't do this job that long and not have some downs as well. But I've had a really good career, and I've had a lot of enjoyment doing it. It's been pretty fulfilling. I moved up fairly quick right away to patrol sergeant, and then I was a patrol sergeant for roughly 8 or 9 years. Got promoted to commander, and I would think I was a commander for 16 or 17 years, and that was the role I was still in when I got asked to step in as interim chief a while back. So yeah, it's been enjoyable. Not really what I expected to be sitting here from this office talking to you today. I was never that guy that said that you want to be a chief of police one day. That just really wasn't me. I've never been an overly ambitious person. I've always just tried to make the best of whatever position I was in at that time. Whether I was a sergeant or a detective sergeant or a commander, I just wanted to really focus on that role and not really focus on the next step. And it just ended up working out. Each time I got promoted, I was approached by my senior leadership and said, "Hey, it's time to move on." So it's been enjoyable. I've enjoyed it.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about that because I think that that's probably exactly why you promoted quickly, is because you took your time to learn the role and to do it really well. And people recognized that and said, okay, we want to, have you do the next thing. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me throughout my career, and they've asked me questions, like maybe they just graduated from, whatever program or certification, and they want to get into the wellness space. And they're like, what do I do? How can I get where you are? And I'm like, slow down a little bit, gain experience within, your space, make sure that you do all the things that you can to be an expert in whatever it is that you're doing. And I find that a lot of them are like, well, I just got my certification and I just want to go from 0 to 1,000. How can I do that? And I'm like, well, I think that you can work really hard and you can advance quickly. But I think there is a little bit of slowing down, taking your time. There's no substitute for time sometimes in the game, and having the confidence and experience of working directly with people and, making sure that you understand exactly what it is that you're doing. And I find that a lot of people don't like my answer when they ask me that. They're like, how do I? And I'm like, well, I've been doing this for a decade, a decade plus. So it's, a lot of time in the game to be able to know. And I look back on things that, when I was younger, I thought I knew everything, and I realized how little I knew at that time. So I would guess that your ability to slow down, take your time, and try to get really good at whatever role was put in front of you was exactly why you were able to progress quickly.
Maybe, I guess, probably a good point, but I enjoyed it. And I think the slowing down has definitely helped. Each time I slowed down in one position, it made me better at the next position. Because I had learned what I could at that level before I went up. If you go up too fast, sometimes you're behind the curve on what you should have known maybe 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
That was just kind of always my mindset, to just make the best of where I was at and let chance take me where it does. So I was never never that guy that was looking to move up as quickly as I could.
How do you keep it fun after 30 years? You said that you're like, I really enjoyed it. I kept it fun. How do you do that, especially with, we know, the ebbs and flows of life and some of the challenges of the career? How are you able to keep that mindset?
I think you just hit it. I think it's just the mindset. You have to acknowledge that there's, regardless of what career you're in, that probably especially in a select few, that there's always ups and downs. And you just have to learn to recognize when you're on those downs and then work to get yourself back in that upward swing. And as far as the fun part of it goes, if you can't have fun helping people, I don't know what you can have fun doing.
Yeah, I love that. I love that sentence. When you were talking, one of the things that popped up in my head is maybe the old cliche of like, choose your hard. I think that, at least for me, there's been plenty of times where I kind of look outside and it's, that idea of like the grass is greener. I think a lot of times we look externally at things, and I've been reminded quite a few times by people in my life of like, everything is going to be hard. Every career, every relationship, it's all going to be hard. And so you get to choose your hard, and I think also being able to understand that the peaks are never as high or as long as we want them to be. And same with, you said, the downswings or the valleys, you're never going to be there forever. And so if you can keep almost that like mentality of stoicism of like, how can I try to stay level through all of it? It helps you to stay on path. And I think it creates less of that burnout. And that's something I have to actively work on, because I feel like naturally I'm a pretty like up and down person. I have to work really hard to stay level. And I think that creates that resiliency through all of life's ups and downs. But I've been reminded a few times, it's like, you may look at another career and be like, wow, that might be more fun. But it's like every career is hard. So you just have to choose your hard.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I've seen in 30 years, I've seen a lot of guys come and go. And it was when I would hit my lows and I think maybe it's time to do something different, I would just think, okay, how many people do I know that went through this, chose something different, and then had to fight tooth and nail to try to get back in?
Yep.
So instead of choosing something different, I just found a way to get myself back up to where I need to be, and was always happy that I did.
I like that a lot. Yeah. And I think that we can, apply this to relationships too. And like, how can we create longevity and health within our relationships? Because I think the easy part is to just jump ship, right? It's like, this is hard. Like, and then you're out in the dating field and you're like, man, I want back to where I was because this is the worst. But you have been now successfully married for 32 years, which is a huge accomplishment. And, a part of wellness and what we talk about a lot is, how can we help younger officers and, employees who are coming into this career to have long, fulfilling, healthy relationships outside of the career. And so do you have any relationship advice or a secret sauce that you can share that's helped you to stay in a marriage for 32 years?
Marry the most wonderful person in the world. That's the easiest way to do it. No, there's always challenges, but I guess I've been as fortunate in life as I have at work. My wife and I both have the same philosophy that, some things just aren't worth getting upset about. They say that marriage is 50-50. Well, it's not. It's 100-100. Mm-hmm. You have to give everything you got every day. And you just got to keep perspective of what's important, in life. And the second that something may be bumpy or rough, you think about what would life be like differently. And if that scares you, then you do exactly whatever it takes to fix what you need to fix.
Yeah. Do you think that there is truly a work-life balance? Do you think that exists?
It has to. You have to find that way. I was gonna say this for your last question, but we're on the topic now. Is something I always tell the younger officers, or I'll even speak to academy cadets, is you can't let this become your life. I always try to tell them, being a cop is not who you are; it's just what you do. Mm-hmm. So come to work, be the greatest cop you can be. Enjoy it, do as well as you can. But when you get home, hang it up. Hang the uniform in the closet and become the best husband you can be, the best mother you can be, the best, father, wife, whatever. But don't be a cop when you go home. Find a way to get away from this line of work and put your mind to rest. Put that part of your mind to rest. Because if you live this job 24/7, I don't know how anybody would make it.
Did you have certain strategies? You said like when you get home, like hang the uniform up. Was there anything that you did that was kind of like that hard shift for you mentally that worked out where you were like, okay, now I am in like home me, and I'm not like work me anymore?
I don't know if there was something specific in it every day, but if I had a rough day, I may take a little extra time getting home just so I can kind of decompress and just try to get over whatever emotion I was feeling. And then just go home and focus on what was truly important to me. That was the people that were waiting for me there.
Yeah. And I think that, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but for me, I sometimes have to constantly remind myself, like it's a constant, like, this is what matters, because I've let my life get way out of balance before, where I had poured my entire identity into my career too. And I allowed a lot of my relationships to suffer because of that. And I allowed my relationship with myself to suffer. I truly was like one track mind, and it was career or nothing. And I have to continue to tell myself I can be effective in what I do and I can give 100% to my career when I'm there. But I also have to intentionally give that space and that energy to the other things in my life too. And it's not without effort, and so sometimes we have to check our priorities if things get a little out of whack. And I think that there are going to be seasons where, or times or events where maybe you have to be more in work mode. Maybe there's an event or something that happened, and there's going to be other times where the reverse is also true. I don't believe in like true balance. I think that it's kind of like this ever evolving, like, you're trying your best, but I have to remind myself of what's important. And a few things that I've kind of learned, some tips and tricks, and I've learned this through some conversations I've had on the podcast too, is sometimes you need a reminder to shift from one to the other. And so for you to say, hey, the commute home, maybe there's a long way home that you take that gives you that space. I've had some people say that, they will make sure that they don't walk into their home with their uniform on, and they change before they go home. And then they change when they get to work. So it's kind of that like mental shift for them. Like, okay, now I'm home, now I'm at work. I've had other people say, and these are just like some really interesting things, that when they walk into home, there was a tree, outside their home that they would touch and be like, okay, I'm like letting this tree absorb like all my stress and everything that I, went through. And now I can go home and be present with my family. I've had other people who will have journals in their car. So they will get in their car and like write down all of the stuff that's on their mind. Or they'll have like their why written down, somewhere nearby where they can remind themselves of those things before they go. So I find it interesting that everyone kind of has like maybe something different that they do as kind of that reminder of shifting. And so I wanted to share that.
That's kind of cool. Yeah. It's just finding that personal touch for you. My wife and I, unfortunately, we got married before I became a cop. So she knew the person that she married and fell in love with before I was a cop. So she's a very strong person, and she's not afraid to tell me if she sees me veering too far one way or the other. And she's also my safe place. So whenever I have something that she can see that I'm struggling with something, or I'm kind of staring off into space, not being present, she's the person that I can talk to about stuff. And I know that it stays with her. And I think that that's important too, is having that, at least that one person that's you can safely talk to and not have to worry about being judged or saying the wrong thing. I think that's also very important.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that it's also important, the opposite of that, that you said, to have someone that's going to call you out a little bit. But I say this all the time because I think there's a caveat to it. Like, have people who are going to call you out who are on your team. Because if you have people who don't want you to win and they're calling you out, to me, it's not helpful. It's more hurtful. But if you have someone like your wife who is your safe space and is going to keep you in check, and you know that it's all love and they want you to win, then that's the best case scenario.
I've been lucky in that aspect.
Sounds like it. I think everyone who's listening, that's something to aspire, 32 years of marriage. You don't see that these days, and I was talking to someone else recently, and we were talking about this idea that in law enforcement, in the first responder profession in general, there are these statistics that everyone has just kind of adopted as truth, and almost like, well, I guess I'm going to be divorced 3 times. Like, it's just a part of the job. Or, well, I guess like my back's just going to be jacked up and I'm going to have 3 shoulder surgeries and it's just a part of the job. Or, I guess, and it's all these different things that I think we're noticing that people are almost convincing themselves that it's an inevitability. And by having these conversations of like, hey, those are things that could happen if you're not proactive and putting in place habits that are going to reduce that risk and be more preventative. Like, of course, if you don't take care of yourself physically, you're not going to feel great at the end of a career that puts your body through wear and tear. It's just not going to happen, but if we know the likelihood of these things happening, because there are people who went through that before you that can give you those early warning signs, then we can be more proactive and preventative. I think the same goes with relationships. That the career is challenging, shift work is challenging, the stressors can be challenging. And so how can you create a healthy home environment that can set you up for success, so that you're not just accepting 3 divorces because it's just a part of the job? And so my hope is through these conversations, people understand that they have the power and the ability to choose how they want to live their lives. And it's not meaning that divorce will never happen. It's not meaning that injuries will never happen, but how can we have more of these empowering conversations that inspire people to be more proactive?
I agree.
For you, you said that you maybe never saw yourself as chief. And here we are 4 days in, chief of police. You made it to the top. I know leadership is something that's really important to you. And can you talk a little bit about your leadership style, maybe what you think makes an effective leader, and what are some of those conversations that you're having or that you're planning on having with your team about wellness and training and being more proactive?
Okay. Well, yeah, of course, by the time you get to this position, you've gone to a dozen different leadership conferences and schools, and they all want you to do that very thing you just said. Pick your leadership style, identify what kind of a leader you are. And to be honest, I think this is just my opinion, of course, but to be successful, you can never limit yourself to one leadership style. Mm. I think different circumstances call for different leadership styles. I think different people respond better to different leadership styles. So I think you really try to learn the aspects of a lot of different things that may be beneficial, a lot more tools in your tool bag. Because I just don't think anybody can be effective for very long if they think they're going to treat every individual the same way all the time, or even every circumstance the same way all the time. There's obviously a time to be autocratic and directing people to do things, and they need to know they need to do them right then. In my mind, that's just emergency situations. But really, servant leadership is a great thing that I truly believe in. There was a saying, I believe it was Simon Sinek that said it, that being a leader or being in charge doesn't mean you're in charge of people. It means you're accountable to people. Mm. And I think that that's probably one of the things that stuck with me through all the different things I've done to try to improve myself as a leader. That was really something that stood out to me. So I think for my leadership style, it's just kind of a mixture of whatever I think works. I'm lucky to be in a small agency where I get FaceTime and some one-on-one time with almost everybody in my department within a 3 to 4 week period. I usually get a chance to talk to everybody. So I try to learn what makes them tick. What are their goals? What do they respond well to? What do they don't respond well to? And I try to just tailor to the point that's reasonable to whatever I think would be the most effective in reaching them and trying to help them get the most potential out of themselves and honestly give my community the most benefit out of them. So leadership styles for me is across the board.
I actually love that answer.
What I did when I first come in, you asked that, I think that was the second part of your question. I knew there was some challenges. Our agency was not in a bad place by any stretch. We were facing some challenges. So what I did as soon as I got the interim position, I asked everybody to come in and meet with me one-on-one. So I would work with their schedule. If that meant coming in at 9:00 at night to hit my night guys, I would come in and I spoke to everybody at the agency individually, asked them what was going well, what could be done better, what causes them frustration, what do they think that they need. And then at the end of that, I compiled that and tried to look for some themes. And then out of those themes, I tried to recognize, okay, what's a long-term fix and what can I make better tomorrow? And I took those steps and it went really, really well. And honestly, I think it's part of the reason why I'm here today as not the interim chief, but the chief. And I didn't do anything ground shaking. I didn't turn the light on over anything. I just made some small tweaks and tried to stay consistent and genuine to what I was doing. And it seems to be that the department's responding well to that. So I'm looking forward to continuing to make those changes and little improvements as I can.
I love that. I love that you understand the nuance of working with humans and that everybody is different. And so we have to, when it comes to people receiving the information, you have to understand that everybody is different and is going to learn differently, receive things differently. They're going to care about different things. So I love that you mentioned that when you are working with different people, you have to adapt your style and your messaging so that it's effective. And because while you're saying this, in my mind, I'm like, I have had to learn the hard way about that. Like there have been many times in my career where I tried to stamp things and walk into different groups and almost be robotic with how I teach things and realize really, really quickly that you're going to flop 50% of the time. Because some people are going to love it, but you have to be able to identify, the culture and, the people and, be able to adapt. So did you learn that the hard way, or do you feel like that's, something that you've always been really good at, to be able to connect with each person and figure out what's important to them?
No, I don't think I've always been real good. I mean, I know that I've had my failures in talking with people, and it's taken some very direct conversations to learn that sometimes.
Yeah.
But I also had, I've worked for a lot of different leaders. Before the law enforcement career, I was military. So I've worked with all types of leaders. Some were good, some were bad, but you learn something from all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can think, okay, how did I best respond? What type of leadership did I best respond from? And I take that into consideration, but then I have other peers that responded differently to that person, but they responded best to this person. So I think it was just trying to learn as I go. But yeah, I certainly had my failures as well. I mean, I think sometimes you learn the most from your failures, but I don't know that anybody gets it right the first time.
Yeah, I agree. And, I know it sounds really silly, but obviously, I want to do my best with everything. I think we all do. We want to feel like we aced it every single time. That's not necessarily the reality, and I don't want to say I encourage falling flat on my face and getting back up, but I do appreciate the learning opportunities that I've had to become better. If we all felt like we just were always good enough, we would never strive to be better. And so I think having those moments of okay, maybe that didn't work as well as I wanted it to, or maybe that was a complete flop. How can I learn from that? And what are the things I can do moving forward? And I think it takes an incredible amount of awareness and self-assessment for us to do that. And when you were talking of saying, hey, I looked around and I noticed things, I think we have to get out of our own way sometimes. And we have to do that. We have to look around, and maybe you'll appreciate this analogy. And I've said this before on the podcast, but I feel like when you're really new at something, you almost get like this tunnel vision, right? It's like you can only see a small piece of the picture. And I used to be a skydiver. I was a professional skydiver. And so when I first started my training into skydiving and I was really new, I could only see the instructor in front of me, right? And I was like, that is my whole world, is the person that is in front of me. And then as I, progressed and became more, professional and advanced in what I do, I could see everything. I knew exactly what direction I was facing. I could see the mountains in the distance. I could tell how far off of the flight path I was or how far from the land. I knew exactly, I could see other jumpers up ahead or below with canopies. And so I had a really good full picture of what was going on. And I think that there's certain times in our career where we are going to be really tunnel vision because maybe we're new at something, and we have to develop the skills to be able to zoom out and see a bigger picture and understand what works. And so I think that as we evolve and we enter into different positions, and I think of this maybe as it relates to you, when you go from being a sergeant to a lieutenant, maybe there's that shift where now you're trying to learn something new, and it may take some time for you to be able to have the ability to zoom out a little bit. And so I was in a burn house for the fire department, and they threw me in their suit, at their breathing mechanism. And I was right back to square one of like, oh my gosh, I can only see right in front of me. And so what you said of like different times in your career, learning what works and what doesn't, sometimes you have to have that ability to zoom out in order to understand. But if you're so in the trenches or you're so new, you might not have the ability to do that yet. I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah,
absolutely it does. I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think that's what we talked about before of like, how can you maybe slow down a little bit? How can you get a bigger picture and perspective and continue to learn? And then how can you evolve over time? And I think it's never ending, and I would imagine that you feel the same way. You've reached the pinnacle of the career. You're at the top, right? You're chief of police, but that doesn't mean that you're going to stop learning or growing or trying to be better. It's never a destination. It's always a journey of self-development.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've always told myself, and I'm going to do my best to hold myself to it, that when I ever lose that drive to continue to grow, continue to learn, you stop being effective, you stop being helpful. And at that point, it's time to say it was a good career and hang it up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that also, and I don't know if you have had to do this throughout your career, but, being able to continue to connect with your why and have a deeper reason why you're doing the things that you're doing also, I think, helps to create that trajectory. And I think that we're all going to have experiences in our life where maybe we feel a little burnt out or we feel like we're not progressing or, but being able to connect to a deeper mission. And I'm curious for you, like, when you entered in this career, did you have a specific why? And has that, I guess if the answer is yes, has that stayed the same or has that evolved over time too?
I did have a why, and I think it's in principle it stayed the same, but of course it's evolved because times change. At a very young age, it was instilled in me that those that have the ability to protect themselves have a responsibility to defend others. I come from a very strong military family, but not cops. So that was kind of drilled in me at a very, very young age. And I don't know if even my parents knew how hard I would take that. Mm-hmm. Now, they may have got an idea when I got kicked out of school a couple times, but I always had that mindset. And then I always had law enforcement officers in my life that were positive role models, whether it be Little League football coach or Little League baseball coach. And even in, maintaining those relationships all the way up through high school, and seeing what they did, how they helped me, how they helped my family, how they helped others. It was just something I really, really had a passion to do. And, out of high school, you're not old enough to be a cop yet. So I was like, well, what's the next best thing? So I went to the military and did 4 years there. And then literally 2 days after getting out of the military, I was in the academy. Mm-hmm. So it was just something that I wanted to do. And that's the one thing I rushed as fast as I could. I would want to get in the career field. And then from there, I've just taken it on. That desire to help people has never changed, fortunately, because it's what motivates me and drives me. And in this career field, you get a lot of people that say thank you. I'm fortunate to work in an area that's very pro law enforcement. Even when things happen nationally that tend to affect that, I still am in a very supportive community that has never in my career gave the impression that they were anti-law enforcement. So helping them is always something I've prided myself on. But even when they say thank you, there's always those rare occasions where someone comes up and grabs you and they thank you, and then they tell you why they're thanking you. And it's always inevitably, it's something that happened 10, 15 years ago that you don't even remember, but they remember like it was yesterday. So to have that type of an impact on somebody, and it's usually not something heroic or, what you would consider more than just another day at the office. But when you think about how it impacted them, it's really, really satisfying, and it drives you on to waiting for the next one.
Yeah. I think that we all want to look back on our life and have a sense of pride for the work that we did. And for you guys, like, I know that maybe you don't get the thanks that you deserve always. Obviously, you work in a really good community, and not everyone can share that same, response. But I think we have to hold on to those things, and we have to understand that the pursuit of helping people is worth it, even if you don't get the validation that maybe you deserve. Even if someone is listening to this that maybe works in a community that isn't supportive or is more negative, I think that you have to stay connected to the pursuit of helping. And I think that everyone agreed. It's so interesting because I think everyone would agree that when you start in the career, the comment is always, if I can help one person. And then you feel like you helped one person, and now you're like, I gotta help everybody, and it feels like it's never enough. Right. And I always go back to that story of the little boy on the beach. Have you heard of this with the starfish?
I don't think so.
So there's this story of this little boy on the beach, and there's like thousands of starfish that had washed up on the beach, and he's like throwing them back in. And this fisherman was like, hey kid, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm helping the starfish, I'm saving them. And he's like, you're not going to be able to get to all of them, right? And he's like, it's okay, just one at a time. And so like, I try to remind myself of that too, because I feel like sometimes I get ahead of myself where I'm like, I want to have the biggest impact ever. And I have to remind myself that it's just one at a time, slow and steady. And you may never know the impact, and that's okay. But the pursuit of the impact is worth the continuous effort of one at a time. So I think that sometimes we have to remind ourselves that it's worth it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you probably reach more people than you ever realize. I think if you're truly trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, you'll probably be impacting people that you'll never even know that you've impacted. But you'll leave an impression on them that they'll remember, which is important.
Yeah. I had, and of course, I'm trying to hold it together. Like, I don't want to be the girl in the police station that's like crying and everyone's like, who's this girl? Like, why is she emotional? But I didn't cry, but I was like, it hit like a string, like a heartstring for me. But I was doing an on-site with an agency, and there was a gentleman who was dressed up, and you could tell he worked at the PD. And then you had a guy who was in like normal clothing, all tatted up, and they had like an interaction, and the guy who was tatted up left, and the guy came back in. Turns out he was a detective, and he said that was a guy who he had arrested many times in the past for drugs, and I think he was maybe incarcerated for a period of time. He had now been out and sober for 5 years, and as a part of his recovery, he wanted to come and thank him. And this was like years and years and years later. And I was like it just made me, kind of emotional because, obviously I come from a background where my dad was also an addict, and I understand how hard recovery is. And I understand that you need all the support you can get. And obviously this detective said something to him or had an impact enough on his life where he's coming back to thank him years and years later. And in that moment, I was like, that is what it's all about. Like that is that moment. And I don't know if he's had many of those moments in his career, if that was the first, but it like hit a string with me, a chord with me where I was like, wow, like that's so cool.
That is.
It was so cool. My final question, and I know you already said this earlier, but I want to ask the question. I want to allow you to repeat and or add anything else that you would like to, but for the younger generation who are coming into this career, what words of wisdom would you share with them that either you wish you would have known or that's helped you along the way that you want to pass on to them?
Okay. I think first and foremost is just to reiterate, you've got to have a work-life balance. This isn't who you are, it's just what you do. Come to work and do it well, but then go home and be a person well. You have to have that. Otherwise, you'll even though it's with the best intentions in the world, you'll burn yourself out. The next thing that we didn't talk a lot about, but take care of yourself physically, take care of yourself mentally. This job takes a toll on both. The statistics are scary about how long career cops last after retirement because they didn't take care of themselves. So don't be that guy. Work hard so you can retire and actually enjoy life after retirement. But I think that's really the most important advice I can give is just be a great cop every day and go home and be a great person when you're done and take care of yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the extra add of like quality of life. Like when you get to the end of it, do you have quality relationships? Do you have your health intact? Is there quality of life so that you can enjoy the fruits of your labor and have a long and successful retirement? So I appreciate you coming on here today, and I appreciate you sharing your words of wisdom, and congratulations on being the new chief of police. I really, really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you having me on. I've enjoyed it.
Of course.